an original.
From Story Studio Network.
Hello, how are you now? It's Now and Next. I'm Dave Trafford for Story Studio Network. Hope your week's going great. Looking forward to next week. Normally, wouldn't get too excited at our house around Halloween. You know, our kids have kids, so there's nobody in the house. But what we're going to get to do is go to visit James and Elliot on Halloween. Yeah. So that means that James can take his parents out trick-or-treating, and Elliot and Grandma and I, well, we'll get to answer the door at his house. So that's good fun. I'm reminded of one of the first times that James and Elliot's dad went out trick-or-treating and kind of knew what it was about, right? He understood the whole idea that people are going to give me candy. Cool. And he was Batman. He had his Batman shirt on and his Batman mask on, and he had his bag and was all set to go. And we lived in a neighborhood in Don Mills, and it was all like townhouses. So lots of green space. It was great. Everybody knew the kids, and the kids knew everybody. So Halloween was great fun on that street. Anyway, he goes to the door, rings the doorbell, and these two women who live next door, and they answer the door, and of course they know who he is, and he's only, I don't know, he might be just going on 4, not quite 4. So they open the door, and he looks up square at them and says, "Merry Christmas!" Puts out the bag. Yeah, well, we need a little work. So, you got good stuff, got a laugh. So, anyway, that's what we're looking forward to. Stories of James' first Halloween of awareness and getting to hang around with Elliot. So, that's good fun. All right. Welcome in. I hope you're enjoying this week here on Now and Next. A little different than what we've been doing, and we'll get back to it next week. Talking more about the stories of the day and some of the folks who make and break the news and analyze the news. I do want to get Barb DiGiulio and Kim Geddes back in studio. It's been a while since we've had a roundtable, so we'll put that on the agenda for next week. But this week, we're calling it Feed Drop Week here on Now and Next. And in the podcast world, that means what we're able to do is to take one show and drop it into the feed of another show. And it's only to introduce a current audience to something that's going on with another show. So this week we've done that with the 2030 Project, if you've missed that one, talking all about the Canada Disability Benefit. Yesterday, we had a really cool story about the computer language that financial institutions use called COBOL. And that ties the whole system together, internationally, globally. We're getting to a point where the coders, the programmers, those who speak COBOL, we're running out of them. Just because they're aging out. And we're not teaching COBOL to a newer generation. So, what are we doing about that? Is there a role for AI? Is there? And I'm like, seriously, what are we doing about it? Because we can't just kind of say, oh, well, eventually nobody will be able to speak COBOL and our programmers are functionally illiterate. What risk does that put the banks at? What risk does that put your money at, right? Anyway, go and check it out. One Click to Cyber Chaos. Kim Geddes is the host. Jeff Musson drops in from time to time from Coding for Veterans, and we featured it yesterday because it's October, and this is Cybersecurity Month. But as you will know, around here, we spend a good deal of time talking about modern media models, and podcasting is part of that, right? Where does podcasting fit into this larger media universe? You know, we're working on a local programming initiative up in North Bay called Echo. It's a community podcast network up there, having a great time. We're learning a whole lot. Mostly we're learning that there is an appetite and a market for local media content produced in the local media. I know, sounds weird, eh? Yeah. So in all of that, there's been a great deal of conversations against the backdrop of Bill C-18. That's with Facebook and Google, of course, getting into a tangle with our federal government, who have, quite frankly, screwed the entire system up. I mean, really buggered things up for a lot of the startups who have been investing a lot of time, energy, money into these local markets, smaller initiatives. And they're really feeling the pinch. Why? Because guess what? They baked in Facebook promos to their marketing because that's the new world we live in. The feds pick a fight with Facebook. Facebook says, fuck you. We're not publishing anymore. And then the big media outlets, you know, blame Facebook and don't really kind of play any sort of self-aware role in, you know what, we probably didn't need to blow out all the locals. But that's for another day. In the course of this conversation online elsewhere, someone had the temerity to accuse Erin Trafford, our CEO here at Story Studio Network, who sometimes calls me Dad, had the temerity to call her a quitter. Yes, a quitter. Well, yeah, well, that's just, here we go. Fired the gun and off we went. Erin found it necessary to respond, and not with, you know, a tirade online. Okay, then let's really dig in and talk about the state of media in this country. The state of local media. Not just talking about journalism. We're talking about local media, the state of media, the voice of media, the voice of local community, all that stuff. And so within 3 or 4 days, she just kind of put her head down. Boom, it all happened. And it happened while I was on vacation. I look up, holy cow. Anyway, she's got a whole new show. It's called The Fourth Draft. And it's about the next stage of media evolution. What is it we do here? Well, how is it that we interact and react to our local communities, to you as a listener, our audience? How do we include you in what we do? And that's really important, right? You wouldn't listen to this if you didn't think that somehow it didn't reflect something you're interested in or a value or whatever it might be. That's important. So I want to introduce you to a really cool feature that she has on The Fourth Draft. Erin sets up the show, and then she opens the mic at a team meeting, and she just drops the question. And this one happens to be, what would you think if you were called a quitter? It's The Fourth Draft. Check it out wherever you get this podcast.
Well, hello. Welcome in. Episode 3 of The Fourth Draft. I'm your host, Erin Trafford, and we're going to do something a little different for this episode. We are calling it an eavesdrop, because dropping stuff in podcasting it's like a whole thing. It's a drop. It's a promo drop. It's an episode drop. It's a special drop. It's a bonus drop. Well, today we're going to eavesdrop. And I kept this so simple. I didn't futz. I didn't fiddle with the sound. This is literally the raw drop because I want you to feel the raw conversation. So last episode, we talked about this whole idea of quitting the media business, how it feels, why it happens, the pressures that exist to create that dynamic, the emotions behind it. So today, as promised, I'm bringing you into a literal behind-the-scenes conversation that we had at Story Studio Network in one of our Monday Zoom calls. So yes, this is a Zoom recording. You're going to hear the voices of me. You're going to hear my dad, Dave Trafford. You're going to hear our producers, Becky Coles and Jen Hudson, and our technical producers, Mike Trutler and Drew Garner. You're going to hear our head strategist, Andrea Palacio. We're going to talk about the pain and the reality of what it is to quit the media. So one of the things that has been coming up as I've been chewing on this and talking to a bunch of folks is this idea of, I think you guys saw the post, this idea of quitting. Like, tell me, what do we think about? Did we all kind of quit? No?
Global left me, for the record.
But I think for most of us on this call, our employer left us, and so we left them before they could make it official. We decided to take care of ourselves. So that's where my back gets up about quitting, because I don't see how, because it always seems to follow this negative connotation. And it's like, I don't think taking care of myself is a negative thing. So that's fine.
It can have a positive connotation, though, with the idea of, cutting your losses at a certain point and not continuing to dig that hole deeper or whatever. That kind of goes in line, and this is not quite the scenario we're in here with this, but the idea of the gambler's fallacy, that if you just keep playing that next hand, that might be the big one. So it's maybe the same thing with whatever job you're in. You think, I'll stick it out for another year, and then I know something's going to change. At a certain point, it's like, just get out, look for something different. There's no harm in that. That's just how life works. And sometimes you have to just know when it's time to abandon this track and try something different. Because that's also what the definition of insanity is, doing the same thing over and over and again and expecting different results.
But isn't that what it is to have a job on air these days? You just go in and it's like Groundhog Day.
Well, and it's almost like fight or flight for your whole career, right? Because when I was in broadcasting school, they were like, okay, so like, if you're in this for the money, or like, because it was mostly guys in my class, the chicks or whatever, like, or the music, like, get out now, here's the door. And, like right from the very beginning, a lot of people are like, like, you're probably going to want to leave. And then you get into the industry and it's like, okay, so there's ratings and there's, people are being, ratings are done and we're going to move in a different direction. So it always felt like fight or flight. Like, is this the round where they're going to decide this is not the direction they want to go in, and now I'm suddenly unemployed and looking for something else, and I've got to pack up a car and drive halfway across the country to another gig? Like, that's hard.
We've all worked too for a company where, is this my November?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, all of a sudden my body just remembered that feeling.
What does that mean? What is this?
Well, is this my November?
Jamie.
You're going to get fired just before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to fire you in December because that would look bad. So they'll can you in November.
And it's ratings September and October. And
Yep.
Although at a certain point at 10:10, at least from a technical producer standpoint, it did get to a point where the best I could hope for is like, well, they probably won't let me go because they're struggling to hang on to technical producers now. They need us. So they're scraping the bottom of the barrel in terms of staff that they actually have. So at a certain point, it was like, I know they won't get rid of me because they can't afford to, because they don't have enough people. But then that became their problem.
For me, I've never stopped loving what I do. I actually would love to be doing that again. That's why I was drawn to this company. I love being on air. I love writing. I love connecting with audiences. I quit my boss and my employer, not the job per se.
Yeah.
True.
I joke when I say, half joke when I say global left me. But I would turn this around because, unlike the rest of you, I was on the other end of some of those conversations where people had their November. And overwhelmingly, historically, the industry has quit in many ways. The industry itself quit on itself. And I say this with all due respect, when the Slate family sold Standard Radio, I didn't blame Gary and the Slates. Gary was asked point blank, why are you doing this now? Well, because he says, this is the end of it. This isn't going to go anywhere from now. This is the time when it's most valuable for me to get out. Gary Slate is not a quitter. Right? I mean, he looked at it, what was there, has turned it into, $1 billion of worth of philanthropy and all kinds of other really interesting support for the arts and culture. And so, but I think the structure, the industry itself was never able to keep up. And in many ways, it quit on itself. The reason that we're all here is because it could not meet our expectations anymore, period. I know you guys were doing your in-depth webinar sessions the last Thursday and Friday, Erin, you and Jamie. And I read all your notes and I thought, this is really great. I could hear the fireworks going and everything else. But when I got to the heart of what you guys were rediscovering and then they were articulating is exactly why we are here. And we said this years ago. Our philosophy has always been audience first. If we do not put our audience at the center of the crosshairs of everything that we do, then we're lost. And it was great because that's what came out of my takeaway from your takeaway on Thursday and Friday. Okay, this really does reinforce why we're all here. So, and that's a hard thing to teach. It really is.
It's a hard thing to teach, but it's also, as the person who's running this business, I mean, I understand it fundamentally from a content and an ethos perspective. It's a hard way to build a business because I actually think it requires a lot more commitment to multiple energies than a typical business. We're not out here selling widgets, right? Like the program you're referring to, first of all, Jamie and I spent 3 days with gooey brains after those 2 days because it was so epic. It's our new consulting firm, Simplicity Designs. And I have the most respect for this firm. They're based in Atlantic, Canada. They want to elevate Atlantic Canadian businesses. They have an insanely good track record. And I don't know it to be true whether we're the first media company they've ever worked with, but we were in this cohort with folks selling coffee beans and construction materials. And it was just so clear to me that, quitting media, and I want to end this conversation by asking you guys this question. And if it's too personal, tell me to just shut up. But I hold so dear the ways our business touches our audience, touches ourselves, touches our families, touches the business writ large, that being labeled a quitter by somebody who I had admired was probably the most painful insult I had endured in a long time, because I worked so hard to try to keep that value of audience first and being the best and understanding how complex media was. So I'm just wondering for you guys, have you ever felt like someone has called you a quitter in a pejorative sense? And how did you deal with that?
I would have felt sorry for them. I mean, I know who you're talking about, and I actually feel kind of sorry. And I don't mean that in a patronizing way or any other. I just think back to my point where the industry has quit on itself. And there are people who are caught up in that and think that because the likes of us are here carving a new path in a new model of media and community media, that somehow we're contrary to all of the stuff that they stood for and have tried to do. We're actually taking a page out of the old playbook from when it did thrive, when it did touch local community, right? I mean, that's where we are.
Yep.
So I wouldn't feel insulted. I know why you do.
Thank you.
but and if, to be fair, it wasn't directed at me, but indirectly, I guess it was. But I think, there's a really thoughtful individual who's committed to the craft, all the things we valued, and somehow has been swept up in that and lost in it. And to think that somehow you or anybody in this room is a quitter, oh boy, you're looking at the wrong end of the telescope.
Well, and I think it's also imperative to look at this and say it doesn't have to be all one or the other. It is not this or that. Why is it not all? Right? in my view, I'm 100% with you, Dave. The media has quit, like the industry's quit on itself. It's quit on its audience. It's forgotten that radio is a community service. You don't serve your community. Why on earth are they supposed to serve you? Right? So if there's another way to serve a community, then why are we not all getting on board and saying, how can we make this better? As opposed to, well, shit, you quit the radio or the broadcasting industry, so you have no say. Or, you don't know what we're dealing with. We all know what is going on in the industry. We're in it for a long time. And there's a reason why we wanted to see if there's a different way to do it.
For me, they always said to me, like, this is not a race to know who's the fastest, but it's like a marathon. And they say it so many times. So when I quit, I felt like they judged me, like you weren't able to handle the marathon, like you were the fast racer. And I felt like, so I mean, I know who I am and what I did and why I quit, but it's so like sometimes frustrating because they don't see it. And it's like, I know I'm right and you're wrong, but you will never be able to see that. For you, I'm always gonna be the fast racer.
Something just popped up in my mind. So we started our 2 days in those sessions with FAST by watching Brene Brown's rendition of the In the Arena speech. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious what you guys think as you're talking about people who I think are in the arena with you, but are they? And so does their opinion matter when they call you a quitter?
No, I don't think so.
It doesn't, but when you spend so much time trying to convince them that you are enough and you decide that they are not enough for you, sometimes you want them to see that you are enough.
I would just caution against ignoring it, because it's a real reaction. It's a deeply rooted response. It's shared by a lot of people in the industry. Most of whom we've worked with, admire, whatever. So to kind of push it aside and say it really doesn't matter, I think is a bit of a mistake. We don't have to focus on it entirely and be obsessed with the idea that people think we're quitters or whatever, and that's a negative. But what does that mean for the industry writ large? And I think that's kind of that step back, take a good look at this. Peripheral vision needs to be pretty acute here, because there are opportunities. And I think it actually displays the point that we've already realized. North Bay is a good example. There are opportunities there. Why? Because the media kind of quit on North Bay, right? So I don't say that to suggest that we somehow have to soothe them or argue with them over it, but that level of awareness, just to see what's out there, I think is kind of got to be just as important as it is in terms of what we want to achieve in terms of long-term and intermediate objective.
Cool. Any final thoughts? We have like a minute and a half left in the calendar on this team meeting to get it all off our chests.
Bad people move upwards often. That's all I would say.
Well, you fail up for sure.
And then you take that shit out on the people below you. So that's my only bit.
Good thing I think I'm the shortest person on the team.
I wasn't talking about here.
Maybe I will also say that I think what I've heard the most is the lack of transparency in media. Like, you never know what's happening behind the curtains, and there's no like communications at all. I think that's also one of the biggest factors.
See what I mean? It's kind of complex. Are we all quitters? Or, truth is, I like to think we're just locked on a different future. What do you think? Drop me a note on LinkedIn or pop me an email, hello@storystudionetwork.com. I would love to hear your thoughts. All in all, though, thank you for listening, because in so doing, you've contributed to moving us all forward. And that's what this is all about. Also, massive thanks, so much love in my heart for the entire team at Story Studio Network for this, our first ever Eavesdrop. You can see now, I feel like you can see now why I say that our team is the best team. So if you're listening on your phone and you've got that phone in your hand right now, pull it out and remember to rate and review The Fourth Draft on your podcast player and subscribe while you're at it. Share the show with anyone you think might like it, especially those folks who are into branded content, Canadian media, behind the scenes stuff. You know the people. My contact is in the show notes, and as I've already said, I'm obsessed with LinkedIn lately, so if you want to connect over there, awesome sauce. Next episode, I'm going to take things a step further into the future. We've talked a lot about the past in these last few episodes, but I want to go into the future now. Share with you a little bit more about why we and I am so bullish on branded podcasting for both news media and for brands. We're going to dig more into the possibilities and the potentials. I'm Erin Trafford, and this is The Fourth Draft.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.